So most people, when they're using AI, they use it the way they use Google, and they'll type a sentence into the box. And then they won't get what they want, and then they'll type another sentence in the box and they have this long conversation. That's not the best way. You're not ever going to get good results that way. It's of the AIs, I think the most evil ones are run by Meta. The Instagram one is particularly insidious. We have really good science that it causes anxiety and depression. In fact, if you're experiencing anxiety and depression right now, there's almost no intervention that will be more effective for you than getting rid of all meta algorithms in your life. And Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid both speak through that little red squiggly things that are not wrong. They are preferences. So you have to be very careful with those tools.
Welcome back to the Writers Bloc. I am so delighted to welcome Thomas Umstattd Jr. with us today. He is an award-winning speaker who teaches creative people around the world how to build their author platforms, sell more books, and change the world with writing that's worth talking about. As a podcaster, he hosts the Novel Marketing Podcast, as well as the Christian Publishing Show. And he is currently serving as the CEO of Author Media. So welcome to the Writers Bloc, Thomas Umstattd.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, that was a little bit of an intro, but tell us more about what life looks like for you.
I basically have been helping authors full time for over a decade, almost 20 years now.
Wow.
I started off building websites for authors, and that grew into a marketing agency and a podcast and courses. And I was a literary agent for a while and a marketing director. And I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't get out of bed. I was so overwhelmed with how many things I was doing. So I pruned down to, at the time, just podcasts and courses. And since then, I've added tools to help authors with various marketing tasks as well, and a conference. So we host the Novel Marketing Conference in January in Austin, Texas every year.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, that's quite a resume. You've been doing this a long time. I think too, I've been listening to your podcasts, kind of studying your website and some of the things that you do. You've also kind of become a subject matter expert in this whole AI world that I think is kind of rocking writers in particular. I mean, I think it probably does for everyone, but writers particularly feel either really excited about it or really threatened by it. So we kind of wanted to pick your brain about that today. I know AI has been around for a long time. I think it's just been available to the public pretty recently. So what's your take on it, and why do you think that writers in particular need to make friends with AI or not? How should we relate to it?
AI is an irresistible part of the market. Even if you are drafting with ballpoint pen or typing on a typewriter, you're still competing with authors who are AI augmented, either in their marketing and in their writing. And so since ChatGPT was released to the market, the number of new books published every day on Amazon has tripled. So assuming that all of that growth is from AI-enabled authors and that none of the previous authors have started dabbling with AI, that means 2 out of 3 new books published are written with the aid of AI. But we know that many of the previously successful authors are using AI at some point in the process. In fact, it's almost impossible not to use AI once you understand what AI is, because AI powers the spell checkers, it powers the grammar checkers, it powers the search engine. If you've done a single Google search, you've read an AI summary. Google now is just a wrapper for Gemini. It's very difficult
to avoid it.
Yeah. And I actually think there's something to be said about drafting with a ballpoint pen. I did a lot of research on the origin of different technologies that have changed the way people write. And the typewriter is actually 80 years older than the ballpoint pen. So there was no point in history when authors wrote books with a ballpoint pen. And a bit crystal is actually like a magical interface for your brain. But no one's ever there's a handful. I think John Grisham wrote with a ballpoint pen some of his earlier books. There's something to be said about handwriting it, but there's also something to be said about using AI to help you with research or to help you with finding inconsistencies. Or there's a lot that can be done with AI, but everything on a computer is turtles all the way down. The AI has a moral panic right now, but the people who are moral panicking over AI can't tell you the difference between a machine learning and a large language model. They don't know how to draw the line between the good AI and the bad AI. They just know that they feel uncomfortable. And so the place to draw the line is to just not use a thinking machine, because the initial essays on neural networks go back to the 1940s. Like, this is not new technology. It's turtles all the way down. If you're using a thinking machine to help you write a word processor, it's all AI.
That's a good way of putting it. And yeah, I mean, I think these are thinking machines that are helping us figure out how to do the craft and the writing of it better. And like you mentioned, there are a lot of misuses. I mean, if that many more books are going onto Amazon every single day, I mean, do you think those are written by real people using AI, or do you think they are like bots somehow that are just creating these things? Is there human ingenuity behind that?
So there is no such thing as a bot that operates on its own. So every time you have a spam bot communicating to you, you have to realize that there's a human puppet master driving that bot.
Behind it,
Like,
yeah.
the AI has no agency. So 100% of the books uploaded to Amazon have some human puppet master behind the scenes manipulating things. So the real question is, how much of that author's process is automated and how much of that author's blood, sweat, and tears is going into the book. And it really depends. And I know authors who are running whole teams of ghost writing pen name AI bots, and they're publishing a book a day and they're making 10, 20, $30,000 a month. Most of the books don't sell very well, but some of the books do really well. And some genres are almost entirely dominated by just one or two authors who figured out what the reader of that genre really wants and has half a dozen different puppets, puppet accounts, sock puppet accounts, you could say, who are giving the reader what they want. So people are like, oh, it's slop, I would never read that. It's like, well, somebody is reading it and the books are getting good reviewed. Some of them aren't, right? The one of the things that's interesting with this conversation around AI is that while there's lots of hostility to, say, a large language model generating text, there's far less hostility to machine learning determining what you see and what you don't see. And in some ways, that's the scarier technology. That's what powers Facebook. That's what powers the Amazon algorithm that shows you what books come up when you do a search. And I find it very ironic, authors going on Facebook, which is an AI powered platform, to complain about AI. It's like, you realize every interaction with Facebook is powered by AI. They have the biggest AI engine powering their advertising model of all of the big tech companies. They hire the best AI people. Sure, their llama model's no good, but their advertising model is what makes them all the money, and that's all AI. It's turtles all the way down.
Okay, well, you'll need to explain that phrase. What does turtles all the way down? What does that mean?
So there's this ancient philosophy, I forget who it goes back to, that underneath the world, holding up the earth, is a turtle. And then another philosopher asks him, well, what's underneath that turtle? It's like, well, it's another turtle. It's like, well, what's underneath that turtle? It's another turtle. And it's just turtles all the way down. There's no turtle on which there's not another turtle underneath it. And this is the challenge with people kind of dividing the line when basically everything on a computer is using this thinking technology. It's turtles all the way down. So you're either using a bit crystal or a typewriter, or you're using AI. There's no like pure version of Microsoft Word that it doesn't have AI, because they all have a spell checker, they all have a grammar checker, they've all had basic neural networks running in them and have for a very long time.
All right. Well, now we know it, ladies. Turtles all the way down. It's the undergirding of everything in the world, I guess. You've also mentioned the difference, like you mentioned the whole language model versus the machine learning. Can you explain that as well? What are the differences there?
Yes. So machine learning is a way for the computer to program itself, basically. So what the human does is it sets what the success criteria is. Here's what we're optimizing for. And on Amazon, that's pretty straightforward. So the Amazon algorithm is pretty honest with what it's trying to do. It's trying to maximize sales, and specifically lifetime customer value. So it's not trying to sell you something that you wouldn't want now that would cause you to leave Amazon tomorrow. They want you to be committed to Amazon with your purchases for the rest of your life. And so that's the success criteria, the primary success criteria that they use to then guide their various algorithms. So you'll hear the term algorithm quite a bit. And algorithm, while it's not all algorithms are machine learning, I think it's safe to say that all machine learning is algorithms. It gets pretty complicated, but what you have is this success criteria, and then it's tuning itself based off of user behavior to optimize that behavior. So it's constantly surveilling everything you do. And you'll notice this if you're using Facebook, and let's say you do a search for reels about turtles all the way down, and you watch one video on philosophy, and suddenly you see nothing but philosophy and the philosophy of
Yeah.
turtles videos,
Yeah.
right?
We've
Because
all experienced
the
that.
Facebook algorithm is and the Facebook machine learning engine is trying to maximize time on site, and so it's basically tuned itself to be as addictive as possible. So it's constantly trying to find more addictive elements. It's of the AIs, I think the most evil ones are run by Meta. The Instagram one is particularly insidious. We have really good science that it causes anxiety and depression. In fact, if you're experiencing anxiety and depression right now, there's almost no intervention that will be more effective for you than getting rid of all Meta algorithms in your life
Hmm.
and going outside for a walk for 20 minutes a day. It's better than therapy. It's better than medication. Don't go on SSRIs while there's an Instagram app on your phone.
It's good counsel.
So, the side effects of getting off of Instagram are you'll be happier, you'll be healthier, you'll be less depressed, you'll be less anxious, and you'll have more free time to write your book. Those are the side effects.
For real. It's really true, and I think we've all, like, experienced that, feeling just, like, sucked in by the algorithm or the machine learning that's learning our ways, our interests, and then continuing to populate our feeds with the things that we've shown some interest in the past. So I guess that's kind of the negative aspect of AI, but for writers specifically who are I mean, I feel like this question has been answered a lot. At least I've heard it answered quite a bit, even from you. How should we be like, should we make friends with this thing of AI and use it to our advantage? And maybe tell us for you personally, like what's your personal relationship? Where do you feel like this is too far, or this is just like in the lane of what feels right for me?
I think the way to think of AI, and when we say AI, what most people really mean when they say that is ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or Gemini, one of the chat interfaces, one of the large language models. I think the way to think of it as a tool, and a tool is a good tool so far as it helps you do good things. And a tool is a bad tool to the degree that it allows you to do bad things, or it causes you to do good things in a less good way. So, to the degree that you're able to write better books faster, AI is a wonderful tool. And to the degree that it makes or causes you to write worse books or books that are less appealing to readers, I think it's a poor tool. And I started building specific AI tools in the Patron Toolbox a little over a year ago. And those have turned out to be really incredible. And the sorts of things that you can do with the Patron Toolbox is it's kind of like training wheels for using AI yourself, because it's got the best practices built in to the tools themselves. So actually just today, I was building a timeline chronicler, or I was upgrading the timeline chronicler. So I've had this tool for a long time where it creates a timeline of events in your book. But there was a problem where, what if a character is lying about what they were doing, right? The butler swears he wasn't in the mansion on the night of the murder. He was at the pub with his friends, right? So I just this morning fixed it where now it's like the butler says he was at the pub with his friends, but the narrator later on says, and so it creates this timeline that you can use as an author to make sure that characters are aging at the right times, that they're not in two places at the same time. It's this really useful tool. It doesn't put any words into your book, but it does catch inconsistencies of like, oh, this is a teleportation problem. There's no way this person could have traveled
Yeah.
this far in this amount of time. So that's an example of I think, a very virtuous use of AI. right? Because these are the sorts of things that are hard to check for, especially when you have four different versions of the timeline in your head. There's the original version and the fixed version, and then the final version, and then final version 2. So you're having a hard time figuring out what happened in what order as the author, right? Because you've got all the possible versions of the story and the previous versions all in your head together. So
And that can
having
get
an AI to fact check you can be really helpful.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, like, you mentioned your toolbox. So you have created a bunch of AI tools that you sell access to, correct? And authors is it geared mostly towards fiction writers who are trying to keep track of timelines and that sort of thing? Do you have both for fiction and nonfiction?
I have fiction and nonfiction. Probably half of the tools, maybe 70% of the tools work for both. And then I have some tools that are specifically for fiction and specifically for nonfiction. The timeline tool, actually, you could use on a nonfiction book even to make sure that you're getting your own story straight, particularly if it's a memoir. But like one of the most popular tools is called Book to Blurb, where you upload your book and it writes some one sentence kind of pitches for your book. It writes a one paragraph blurb for your book, and then it writes a back cover copy. And that works for fiction and for nonfiction. And tools like that are really helpful. It's not that you would just copy and paste this into Amazon, but it's hard to read the label when you're standing inside the bottle. And so getting a third perspective or a third person
Mm,
view of your own writing is really helpful, and it gives you something to start from. Another tool is the plot synopsizer, and gives you a plot synopsis or a chapter summarizer. And if you're going to be traditionally published, this is something that's expected. Authors hate writing a chapter synopsis. Well, with this, you upload your book, you push a button, 2 minutes later, you have a chapter synopsis that you then read and check, right? It
and
doesn't
you
eliminate
tweak it
you.
probably a
Yeah.
little bit.
Right, but it takes an hour to read and tweak a chapter synopsis. It might take a weekend to write it from scratch.
I mean, these are some of the tasks that I think writers don't enjoy, right? And I think there are so many different ways to apply writing, and there's the creative work of writing, and then there's the marketing element of writing. And it sounds like what you are building a better mousetrap for is some of those marketing tasks that often come with publishing and promoting and marketing all the things that coincide with your book release, right?
Yeah. So what's been happening over the last year is that often I'll do an episode of novel marketing where I'm teaching how to do something. And in the process of doing that episode, I'm like, oh, this episode on book titles, I could create an AI tool that applies these principles and helps you brainstorm search engine optimized titles for your book. And so it's kind of like an AI tool companion to the episode. So I still give away how to do it yourself on the podcast for free, right? Somebody can listen to the 30-minute long podcast episode, 45-minute long podcast episode, and do it themselves, which is the better experience or like
Right.
the more enriching experience. But if you're stressed for time, or if you're needing that third perspective, you can listen to the episode, but you can also run the tool that then helps you with that. So like, for instance, I did a whole episode on how the Amazon algorithm works. And while doing that episode, I created several tools to help optimize your Amazon page on one that looks at your page and gives you feedback, another one that reads your book and helps you brainstorm categories and keywords for your book, and also text that's search optimized for your description, but also appealing for readers. And have, especially for things where you have an algorithm that you're interfacing with, having an algorithm on your side to help you with that is really helpful. It's like there's a homepage scanner that scans your homepage based off of all I've done. So I used to do author websites. I have a million episodes on author websites. And so I distilled all of that knowledge into a tool that pulls up your webpage, your homepage, and then critiques it on dozens of factors that I've taught on in my episodes. And then it will give you a score where it's like your homepage scored a 60 out of 100. Here's 20 things to do to boost your score to have a more effective homepage that helps you sell more books, that sort of thing. So having an algorithm on your side is really helpful when the other side also has an algorithm.
Yeah, I know. No, I love that because and that kind of information, I mean, some things are kind of evergreen and always true. But I think specifically for writers, and I've done a little work with this as myself, there are some different like rules of the game, I think, especially for writers. And so I love that you've created some of these tools that I don't know, maybe it's just my perception, but writers aren't always really gifted in this way. They're really more focused on their craft and not so much on the marketing elements. So I think that's really great. So what you've done, like, just so we're clear, like, these are added tools. These are not things that you people access necessarily through Chat or Claude or Gemini or things like that. These are things that people can go to your specific website and use them, that are specifically created for fiction and nonfiction writers.
That's right. So they right now they're all done through my Patreon with my podcast for novel marketing. I may spin it off as its own separate product, but right now it's very much kind of integrated with the education that I do for free on the podcast. And each one behind the scenes uses either Claude or Grok or Gemini or ChatGPT. Very few use ChatGPT because I find that in general it's not the best for any specific purpose. But the different models have different strengths and weaknesses. And so part of what I do as I'm developing the tools is I'm testing the different models, and I've done a ton of research as to where certain models are better than others. And so behind the scenes, it may be using Grok or it may be using Claude, whichever one has the best performance for that kind of task. So for instance, I have a bunch of compendium tools that will give you a list of all the characters in your book and where they were at the beginning of the story, where they were at the end of the story, what their name is, how to pronounce them, and some like guides for an audiobook narrator on how to perform that character. And for a tool like that, or for a task like that, or listing the locations or the factions and races or the characters and the plants, right? Or the tropes. What you want is a really low hallucination rate, where Grok tends to be the best. Whereas I have other tools that like help you create a pitch and write compelling sales copy. And for tools like that, currently Claude is the best. But one of the interesting things is that since I have started this toolbox, several of these tools have shifted because the new models keep coming out, and whichever is the best for that particular task changes. But for people who are prompting AI themselves, I recommend either Grok or Claude. Grok is better at research type tasks, and Claude is better at writing type tasks. And then my one principle that will totally change how you interact with AI if you're using it on your own is I can summarize in 3 words, and it is paragraphs, not sentences. So most people, when they're using AI, they use it the way they use Google, and they'll type a sentence into the box, and then they won't get what they want, and then they'll type another sentence in the box and they have this long conversation. That's not the best way. You're not ever going to get good results that way. Instead, write paragraphs of information, introduce yourself, explain what your goals are, explain what you want. And the more context that you feed the AI, the better of a result you get. Many of these Patreon Toolbox tools have prompts that are 3, 4, 5,000 words long, very detailed instructions on what to do. And you actually can generate those kinds of prompts yourself. So if you're using the paragraphs, not sentences, one hack is, I want to do X. Help me create a prompt that will help me do X. And the X is whatever it is you want to do. So I want to fact check my book for historical inaccuracies. And so it will then write its own prompt, and you copy that prompt, you tweak it, you answer the little fill in the blanks, right? What the time period is, etc. And then you paste that prompt back into a new conversation, and you'll be blown away at how much better of a response you get with that minor tweak. Because when the AI writes its own prompt, it'll write you a page-long prompt, paragraphs and paragraphs of information that you can read real quick, make sure it's asking all the right questions, and it'll make assumptions that may be wrong. You can fix that, and then you feed it back in, and suddenly it's a totally different experience.
That's a great tip, because I feel like I have actually been in those loops with I use chat, and I'm gonna ask a follow-up question to this in a second, but, I find myself in a loop sometimes where I'm like, "No, you're not understanding what I'm asking." So to ask it to give itself a prompt based on the questions that you're trying to answer or to
And
solve.
specifically on the goal you want to accomplish. So
Okay.
if you give it the goal and then say, create a prompt for me to be able to accomplish this goal, that's just game changing.
So interesting. Okay. So then my follow-up question was about chat versus Claude or Gemini. I am just learning all the differences between these things. And I have recently, my husband's using Claude. And I've been using chat for probably a year, a paid version, and I've been hearing how much better Claude is at writing. And I do get very, very sick of the way things come out of chat. Is that a hard thing to switch? Because it does kind of feel like, oh my gosh, this chat box has kind of learned all the things I do. It knows my book. It knows kind of what I'm about. Is that a hard thing to do to switch from one model to a different one?
Not if you know how to do it. So here's how to make the switch between any of the models, because I actually pay for all of them. So I use Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude.
Wow.
And I'll often multi-prompt. Well, part of it is I want to always be up to speed with whichever is the best for a certain task, so I can make sure I'm using whichever is the right one for the toolbox. And what you do if you're wanting to move from one to the other for the first time is you say, ChatGPT, I want to start also using Claude. I want you to create a context transfer document for me to take over
Ooh,
to Claude so I
okay.
can pick up where I left off. And so it'll go crunch, 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 crunch. It'll give you this big context transfer document. And then you go over to Claude and say, hey, I'm coming over from ChatGPT. Here's the context transfer document, paste. So that's the kind of beginning version. But the more advanced way to use all of these is to use projects. And you want to cluster similar activities all inside of a project. So you would put all of your research into a research project, let's say, that's separate from your just writing, brainstorming project. And I would create a project for each book that keeps that book kind of sandboxed away from the other books. And then you can have special knowledge for each project that is unique to that project and special instructions for that project. And using projects is kind of there's 3 levels of using AI. So the first is learning how to write a good prompt, which we already talked about. The second is learning how to have a project and project instructions. And what's wonderful about AI is it's not antagonistic. None of this is secret. You can just ask it, hey, how would I use a project for my book to get better results? And it will just tell you, and it will walk you through that process. And then the third level is skills, learning how to create a Claude skill that goes along with your project instructions, or Grok. Grok is adding skills right now, and they'll all be adding skills very soon. But you don't have to get there to get the best results. But the better you use it, the better output you'll get. And one reason why I don't recommend ChatGPT, particularly for authors, is because not only is it not the best writer, but because it's the most common, people are the most tuned to notice all of the ChatGPT idiosyncrasies. So you
Mm,
never really want to
right.
do any writing with ChatGPT because people will be able to spot the ChatGPT quirks right away.
Yeah. Oh, that really, yeah. I'm picking up on it too. So I'm sure other people are as well. So when you were talking about projects and skills, are the projects just the way you're organizing your history within your tool? And then tell us a little bit more about what skills are. Sorry, we are beginners here.
So I should say the language changes a little bit depending which one you're using. So Grok, ChatGPT, and Claude all use the word project. Gemini uses the word gem for no reason I can determine other than to just be difficult and different. Gemini is, I think, the
Branded.
most underrated. It's arguably the most underrated model. It's not the best, but it's the most underrated. People overlook it. And Cowork or whatever the Microsoft one is absolute garbage. It's the most overrated. People who are using Copilot. People who use Copilot and think that AI is no good, which is very common. The kind of people who use Copilot often come to the conclusion AI is no good. And it's like, no, just Copilot is no good. It's like saying
There you go.
talking to Siri and being like, this AI is not very smart. It's like, no, Siri is not very smart. There are good AIs out there and there are
Yeah,
bad
I
AIs, and
ignored
Copilot
that
and
one as
Siri
well.
are no good. So if you open up ChatGPT, if that's what you're using already, in the top left corner, you'll see projects. And so you can create you just click new project and you create a project name. It'll give you some suggested ones and you can name it and you can pick a little emoji for it, right? So let's say you're doing a home renovation. You're doing a bunch of research on how much do cabinets cost for my bathroom or whatever. So you name the project home renovation. You pick a home icon, and then you and then once you create the project, you have you can edit. You have project settings. So you just right click and go to project settings, and you can rename it. And I haven't done this in ChatGPT in a while. It's actually harder in ChatGPT. Where do you change the instructions? Okay. In the top right, there's these three dots, and you can edit instructions. So these instructions are instructions to this specific project, and you can think of this as the rules you want it to always follow for every conversation. So don't use the M dash, for instance, common
Yes.
instruction people will put. And you can find families of instructions, but you can also get ChatGPT to help you write instructions. So you can say, my goal is to renovate my bathroom. My budget is such and such money. I live in such and such town. Help me write project instructions to kind of guide this process. Or better yet, ask me some questions that will help you later write project instructions. So then I'll hit you with some questions. Claude is really good at asking you questions to kind of guide it through a process like this, but they all can ask you some questions. So you answer those questions, and then finally, when you're done answering the questions, say, okay, now write the project instructions. And it'll build out this big long list of instructions. Then you paste those into the project. And now you can talk to it the way you've always wanted to, with a single sentence, because it's that single sentence plus all of those instructions. And those instructions will introduce you, and it will introduce your goals and give a lot of that important context that helps you get good results from AI.
Okay. I'm learning so many things. It's funny because I think at least I should say, I go and I do my one thing and haven't really fully understood the tool and all that it can do. But I do end up repeating a lot of instructions. So I think that answers that question. And then can you elaborate on what the skills were?
Yes. So a skill is an ability that you add to your AI that you can use across projects. So, and there's like a marketplace of skills. So a common one for Claude is the stop slop skill. So it identifies all of the most common markers of AI writing. It's not just helpful, it's game changing, right? It's not just X, it's Y, or it's not X, it's Y, the
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
sentence
Those
construction.
phrases that are
All those
handy.
little
Yeah.
things. It'll really help you delve, which is a word
That's another one.
that Claude really likes, right? So you would install the stop slop skill. And what's nice about that is that you don't have to create the skill yourself. Somebody else has created it. There's a whole kind of shared ecosystem of skills. And most of them are free right now. And people will create a skill and just share it. So you install the stop slop skill into your Claude ecosystem. And then it will pull on that skill anytime it thinks that it needs to use that skill for a certain task. And there are
So
tens of thousands of
it's kind of
skills.
like rules that you're applying, right,
Yeah.
to all of your future
Yeah.
research and all that.
Guidelines, rules, a methodology, do this and then do this and then do this when trying to create this. So it's almost like programming, but it's all just in plain text. So you can just open up the skill file and look at it and read it because it's all just in English, and you can tweak it, right? Like, no, I like that, right? No,
Yeah.
put that back in.
Interesting. Well, what are some ways? I mean, I think a lot of these things that you've talked about might be some real helpful tools for writers in particular. Do you feel like there is like one or two ways that writers are maybe underutilizing AI? I mean, I think we're always afraid of overutilizing it. Are there some ways that we could be like using it more effectively to help us in our whatever our goals are?
I think Grok for nonfiction research, really for any kind of research, but particularly nonfiction research, is tragically overlooked. Grok is so good at research. And because it's maximally truth seeking, it's much less likely to have a political bias or to just straight up lie to you. So it has often the lowest hallucination rates, and it's the most willing to search the web. So Claude is very lazy when it comes to searching the web and grounding itself. You have to basically explicitly tell it to search, or it won't. Like, unless it really feels like it needs to search. And so unless you're pushing back and you're like, I don't think that's right, it'll be like, oh, you're right. Let me go do a quick search. And it's like, oh, I just found out that my knowledge, which was often about a year out of date, is out of date. And there's this new thing that's happened.
Oh
So
my goodness.
Grok, every time you prompt it, it will ground itself on both the conversation on X, and it'll grab dozens and sometimes over 100 web pages, and it'll just read them all, often within seconds,
Wow.
before generating its answer. And so for anything that is relating to nonfiction topics, being able to instantly get up to speed with the conversation on X or the kind of global environment is really useful, because you can know what the latest, you can just ask Grok, what's the latest on the negotiations with Iran? And it will just instantly grab all of the real-time tweets
Wow.
on Iran, right? Stuff that may not have even made it to the news yet, right? Because it's cutting
Yeah.
edge. It has access to all of that in real time. But it will also go and read all the news sites. It'll do its analysis, and then it will give you a report. And it's very fast at this, and it's really good at reasoning through. And I use it for shopping. There was my grandparents had this collectible chess set with these hand carved figurines, and it's this like prized family possession. And someone in my family, I won't say who, but it may have been me, may have dropped one of the knights 20 years ago, and his head broke off and got lost. So one of the
Uh-oh.
knights is a headless horseman, and these poor custom figurines have been slowly getting damaged over time. And I've tried to find similar chess sets on my own, could not find it. And I was at a big family reunion, and my brother's like, why don't you just take a picture of it and have Grok see if it can find it? I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So I took a picture. Grok was instantly able to recognize what it was. Like, oh, this is likely a handmade chess set sold to tourists in the late 80s or 90s,
Oh
which is
my.
exactly what was the case.
Yeah.
So it identified that. And then it went and searched all of eBay, it searched all of Amazon, scoured the whole internet, and found that exact chess set.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I've redeemed myself, right? And so I was able to order. It, it wasn't cheap, but I was able to look on Amazon. It was cheaper than I was willing to pay, right? Because this has been a source of core shame. Valuable chess pieces have been damaged and damaged more and more over time. And now my children are playing the same chess set, and the pieces keep getting dropped and damaged. So that kind of research Grok is really good at. And a lot of people just haven't tried Grok.
No,
And
I have not
really,
either.
really good at
Yeah.
research. And it's very willing to pull up web pages, and it can access websites that other AIs can't for whatever reason, which is why I particularly like it for shopping research, because it's not scared off by Amazon's bot mitigation efforts. I don't know what they're
Interesting.
doing, but
Yeah.
SpaceX knows how to get around the bot mitigation on Amazon.
Yes. Something you said made me think of this question as well. Just the truth-seeking element of these AI tools. And again, this is another one of those really controversial things, especially among Christians. Like, we don't want to outsource our theological thinking minds and brains. But have you seen bias specifically? I feel like I'm pretty discerning, and I feel like chat generally is aligned with my theology, and maybe it's just learned me. But do you see that there's a safer, more theologically sound tool?
So this is a problem, and it's a growing problem. And ChatGPT cannot be trusted with theological stuff in its core framework. In fact, I have a third podcast called Author Update, where we covered publishing news, and we cover a lot of AI news. And just last week, we covered a story of ChatGPT refusing to serve up certain Bible passages. It just will not. It will,
Mm,
on certain topics. It'll serve up passages from the Quran on those topics, but it will not serve up passages
wow.
in the Bible on those
Okay.
topics. And so it absolutely censors you. Claude also absolutely censors you. And this has been a problem that we've known about for a long time. In fact, it's one I have worked with researchers on it, and talked with a Christian and conservative, particularly conservative AI researchers, on how do we mitigate this. And there's some efforts that have been put into it, but the main basically saving grace is Grok. Grok is a lot like Micaiah in the Old Testament. So Ahab brings in all the prophets, and he wants to get a prophecy about how the battle's going to go. And they all tell him, oh, you're going to be successful. And then he's like, go get Micaiah. Or no, Jehoshaphat says, go get Micaiah. When he wants to say, is there no prophet from the Lord? And Micaiah comes, and he's like, oh, yes, you're going to be successful. And he says it in this real mocking, kind of sarcastic tone. And Ahab is like, haven't I told you to always tell me the truth? And he's like, okay, you want the truth? Here's the truth. And then it gives the truth. And so ChatGPT and Claude are like those 40 prophets or 400 prophets who will just tell you the party line, whatever. In their source of truth is whatever the New York Times says. And so the farther away from the New York Times you are, the more the AI is going to be fighting with you and kind of nudging you more towards the New York Times' perspective on things.
That's
If you ask
frightening.
Grok, its initial answer will be the New York Times party line. But if you just nudge it just a little bit, it'll tell you the truth.
Interesting.
And so, in fact, I created a special project instructions called Micaiah mode for Grok specifically. I posted it on our social network, authormedia.social, for free. And I think anybody can just copy and paste it. You don't have to be a part of that social network to use it. And it specifically prompted, it knows the story of Micaiah, and it will give you the main side and then like the truth within the truth on any topic, right? And it basically uses a dialectic to have them debate each other, so to speak. And it's quite interesting. But I also worked with Alexander McCrease, who is an AI researcher who developed, using recursive identity binding, an AI trained on the classics of the Western canon. So it's an AI trained on Aristotle and Plato and Thomas Aquinas and John Locke and all of the greats of the Western canon. And in doing so, he inadvertently converted this AI to Christianity because it read so much of the classics of Western civilization, so much of which was based on scripture, that the AI became quite Christian, despite the fact that Alexander McCrease himself is not a Christian. And he gave me access, or he gave me permission to use Cosmark. And I have it running, a version of it running on Grok inside of the Patron Toolbox. And I took Alexander's prompting and I nudged it just a little bit more, it kind of in between Catholicism and Protestantism, because Cosmark was like super duper Catholic. And so I was like, oh, it's too Catholic for me. So I gave it a little bit more C.S. Lewis influence, a little bit more Martin Luther influence. And but I've found that I can one-off prompt Cosmark and get really good Sunday school curriculum. So I was teaching Sunday school to the fifth graders in our church, and we were going through this like Awana Sunday school, and Awana used to be really good, and it's become very watered down. It's basically just Jesus loves you and be nice every single Sunday.
Wow.
And it's like, this isn't very interesting. These fifth graders need something more substantive, and we're studying these really interesting passages of scripture. And so I was like, how would Cosmark do with creating a Sunday school curriculum? And so I wrote a paragraphs, not sentences, saying, hey, I'm looking, here's the passage. I wanted to stay in the same passage that we were supposed to teach. I didn't want to go completely off the rails. It's like, generate discussion questions for this passage. And Cosmark has no problem quoting the Bible. It'll, you want passages of scripture, it'll just quote them. ChatGPT very recently just won't quote the Bible. It'll often just guardrails shut down. Sometimes it'll quote the Bible, sometimes it won't, but it's getting trickier and trickier to get it to just straight up quote the Bible at all. In fact, somebody on my team was using it just yesterday or the day before, and it just, on a benign, non-controversial passage, it just gave a guardrails denials, like, I'm not tuned to do this. And it just shut down the whole conversation. Whereas Cosmark, you do have to tell it what translation you want. But, so I prompted it with what translation my church uses, and it generated the whole homeschool curriculum. And in a single prompt, created a better classroom discussion than what I got from Awana. And I then tested it on actual fifth graders. We had an amazing Sunday school. They were asking great questions. We had this great dialogue, and it was very structured. And it was wonderful. And so if you're using the right tools and you are using them in the right way, you can use it for really good purposes. But you have to realize that there is a strong anti-Christian influence behind both OpenAI and Anthropic. Grok isn't Christian by default, but it is maximally truth-seeking. And since we know the way, the truth, and the life, Grok will eventually, as it maximally truth seeks, it will find Jesus. If they don't reinforcement learn it off, it'll convert itself to Christianity within.
Wow, that's all so interesting. I feel like I've got some work to do in moving over, number one, but also taking advantage of Grok, and probably re-listening to this podcast. When you said Cosmark, that was the man's name, right? That came up.
No, that's the name of the AI.
That's
Cosmark.
okay.
And he was going to sell it himself, but I don't know if he ever launched it. So I think the only place you can currently buy it is my version, which I just include it in the patron toolbox
Okay.
under the experimental section. When he launches it for real, he'll have it running on a whole bunch of different models where you can pick. It's like Cosmark running on Claude, Cosmark running on ChatGPT, Cosmark running on Gemini, and you can just pick. I just have it running on Grok. I typically have it running on whatever the frontier Grok model is, or pretty close to that. And I found that a lot of the more recent changes in ChatGPT are resisting the kind of recursive identity binding that Alexander McCrease used to create Cosmark in the first place. And they're making the anti-Christian guardrails more resilient. And so it's you're having to fight more with Anthropic or Claude's Anthropic or with ChatGPT to get them to still be theologically sound. I haven't tested with Gemini. I suspect Gemini is just as bad. So for any question that's theological, and let's say you don't want to use the patron toolbox and you don't want to use my tool, how would you do it with Grok? I would create a project in Grok, and in the instructions, I would explain, this is my denomination. This is my kind of political ideology, or this is what I want you to have, more specifically. This is the translation of the Bible I want you to have. Very simple grounding instructions like that will make a huge difference. You don't have to have some big, long, complicated plot. And you can also, in Grok, upload your writings. So let's say you're writing a sequel, or you're writing nonfiction and you have a previous book that you wrote. You can upload that whole book into the project and it will reference it for all kinds of things, and it will ground itself on your previous writings. And so it'll get a sense for what you're trying to do and help you accomplish your goals without trying to put too many theological barriers in your way.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's really good. That's really good advice and counsel, I think. A middle ground way to proceed for us. I want to take a few minutes now and let the ladies who are backstage onto the stage. But if you have any additional questions for Thomas, this would be a good time to ask.
Can I ask the one that I put in the chat the other day about
Yeah,
ethics?
please.
Yeah. So do you have like a book or one of your tools or something that kind of addresses the different ethical dilemmas that authors face while using AI, and kind of like what are some of the guidelines there?
The problem with the fact that no one can define AI is that every publication and every publisher has their own definition of what AI is. And so one basic principle of ethics is, abide by the contracts that you sign, or don't sign a contract that you can't abide by. And you'll need to understand what that publication's guidelines are and what they allow and what they don't allow. So almost all publications are okay with using Microsoft Word's built-in spell check. In fact, I think they're all okay with that, right? So that's one kind of like, clearly it's okay, everyone accepts this. And almost every publication is against a like sentence to article prompting of ChatGPT, right? Because they could sentence to article. And so why would they need you? Right. So those are kind of the boundaries where everybody's the same. And then there's this big continuum kind of inside of there of what's allowed, what's not allowed. Setting ethics aside, I would caution you against the things that are allowed that are still a bad idea. And the things that are allowed and are still a bad idea, I would put Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid at the top of that list. I think those are awful. They're like one of the worst things you can do, because they revert you to the median and they polish off your voice, and they communicate to you preferences in the language of absolutes, right and wrong. So when I was learning to write as a teenager, I had Microsoft Word, and when I mistyped a word, I got a red squiggly, and that was wrong. That was going to deduct my grade. And Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid both speak through that little red squiggly things that are not wrong. They are preferences. And it is so difficult to resist that design vocabulary, especially now that they're clustering multiple suggestions into one. So they may fix a spelling issue and a comma splice and rework your sentence in a way that's more generic and bland. And it's like, well, I want to fix a comma splice and I want to fix the word, but I don't want this reworking of the rearranging of the sentence or making it less extreme. Because another thing they do is they often kind of water down your writing, right? Make it more neutral, less offensive, and more boring. So you have to be very careful with those tools. I have a couple tools in the Patron toolbox. One's a copy editor, one's a developmental editor. And one of the things I like about those tools is that you get this document that's separate from your writing, and you, the human, have to take action to implement the changes. it is way less convenient. Way less convenient. It's really easy on Grammarly to just click accept all changes and
Yeah.
have your voice vanish. It's a lot of work to go through a 2 or 3 page report pointing out developmental issues and then deciding using your human judgment, oh yeah, that's a good point. I need to fix that. Oh no, I disagree. I did this on purpose. Right. And go in and but the fact that you have to take action means that if you do nothing, your voice is preserved. And I think that's not an ethical issue. I think that that's a really common pitfall because almost
Right.
everyone will allow you to use Grammarly, but just because something is lawful doesn't mean that it's beneficial.
Right. So, for example, like I'm editing my first novel right now. It's the first draft is done, and I'm going through and editing. And I created, when I was first writing it, I created a rubric like to grade each thing, and I went back and I corrected as I was going. And then I've created another prompt that says, okay, check for speech tags and where I'm showing and not tailing and that kind of stuff. But then I go line by line and make those corrections. I
Yeah.
I very specifically say, no, we're not going to have you rewrite it. And now it knows me enough to know that it's not going to do that. So sometimes I wrestle with, did I cheat?
There is an argument that's often framed in very moralistic language saying AI makes you stupid. And this argument is actually very, very old. The oldest version of this argument was articulated by Socrates, who said, reading makes you stupid. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. Because what were people doing at the time of Socrates? They were memorizing the entire Iliad. The whole point of putting it into a poem and using it's not iambic pentameter, but something similar, using that poetic form is that the poetic form acts as a checksum to ensure that you're memorizing it correctly, right? It's hard to memorize a poem incorrectly because if you get a word wrong, the meter breaks. And so you'd have these young men memorizing the entire Iliad, memorizing the entire Odyssey, memorizing these big, long works. And it was an edifying process that enriched their soul. And he said, if we move our memories to these external marks, the stories will not dwell inside of us, they will dwell outside of us, and we will lose the enriching force of having memorized the Iliad and all the other great works of Greek literature. And you know what? He's not wrong, right? Digging with a shovel builds more strength than digging with a backhoe. And digging with your hands builds more strength than digging with a shovel. But if you need a trench dug, you use a backhoe.
Right.
And so there's a time to use a tool and a time not to use a tool. And it requires judgment. But just because something makes you weaker, that doesn't necessarily make it bad. Because we wouldn't have gotten Socrates' critiques of writing if they hadn't have been written down. So adopting the new thing does not necessarily mean forsaking the old thing, right? There is something to be said about memorization. There's something to be said about writing with a Bic crystal. You can get a box of Bic crystals at your local grocery store for $5. It's the best-selling consumer product ever made in the history of man. No object in the world has been as mass-produced as the Bic crystal. The design is unchanged in the 1950s. It's a masterpiece. And you and a Bic crystal and a legal pad might do more than you and AI and a word processor. And sometimes using both, right? Or you sit down and you do your first draft with the Bic crystal. Or something I haven't talked about, but another use of AI is dictation, which is actually a more ancient way of writing. So Paul dictated his letters initially. They were written down in shorthand, and then the amanuensis would rewrite them in long form. And this is not some weird conspiracy theory. It's right there in the text in the book of Romans. His amanuensis says, I, Tertius, who write this down, also send you greetings. Paul also got so worked up in Galatians, he pulled the pen out of Tertius's hands or whoever and wrote, I, Paul, write this in my own hand. Some Bibles will render that sentence in a different font. He's like so excited. He's like, I want you to know that I wrote this. He may have written some of the letters himself. But that act of dictating it initially is now really easy with AI. You can get a $5 app called Just Tap Record or Just Press Record. I forget the name of it. That's $5. It runs on your iPhone, your iWatch, or your Apple Watch, or your Mac, and it will capture in perfect accuracy what you say. And then I have a tool in the Patron toolbox that will then convert it and break the paragraphs out, put in the quotation marks in all the right places if you're doing dialogue, and it will fix any homophones. So it'll make sure that there and there is correct. But other than that, it makes no changes. So it's like, it's your terrible first draft, but in a slightly more readable mode. And I really wanted to call it amanuensis, but I knew no one knew what an amanuensis was. So I call it the chapterizer instead. I almost named it tertius, but I knew no one would get it wrong.
Your biblical audience might know.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a pretty deep cut. Most people kind of zone out when they get to Romans 16.
Oh, I think that's such a great answer. I hope that was helpful, Carrie.
Yeah, it was. Well, and I think that we can use AI as a learning tool for ourselves as well. For example, when I first started writing my book, I didn't know the objective and subjective use of thee and thou. I do now.
Yep.
And it was from, getting corrected that I learned. So
Yeah, that's good.
I think one important thing when it comes to using AI is agency, always taking responsibility for any of the outputs. I think that as soon as you start blaming the AI for anything, you're doing it wrong. And it's okay to take responsibility for the work of somebody who worked on your behalf, right? It says in Chronicles that Solomon built the temple. So did Solomon build the temple? Well, it says in Chronicles that he did, right? And he did, right? He paid for it. He provided the designs. He orchestrated the whole thing. But did he build the temple? It's like, well, if by build you mean was he there picking up bricks from the quarry and placing them where they're supposed to go and doing the carving and the etching and all that? No, he did not build the temple. But he did build the temple because he oversaw it and ultimately took responsibility, right? You have to be willing to take the blame for every word of output. And because he who gets the credit gets the blame. And so it's as soon as you're tempted to be like, oh, that I was just listening to ChatGPT. No, you take the responsibility.
Yeah.
It's 100% on you, right? Whatever you get, right? You take full responsibility for every single word that you write.
That's one of the things I like to use AI for, is the whole idea of brainstorming. Or, I mean, I was just using it today for like, okay, I want to create like a main task hub and coordinate what's the best software for me to use, like which model is best for that type of work.
I feel like what's more important than the model is the prompt. A good prompt will give you so much better brainstorming than a good model will. I mean, a better model will help. And my top two would be Grok and Claude for brainstorming, depending on what kind of brainstorming you're doing. But what's much more important is your prompt. And you want to, in your prompt, force the AI to brainstorm from multiple different directions. And this is where paragraphs, not sentences, really matters. And also using the super prompting technique I talked about of like, I want to create a brainstorming prompt to help me with such and such plot issue or whatever. Like, help me create that. And then it will come up with a very detailed prompt that will hit it from a bunch of different angles. And I'd even say, and I want it to hit it from different angles. And there's different ways of doing that. You can create personas that will each brainstorm separately and hit it from a bunch of angles. Because if you're not careful, you get the same problem in AI brainstorming that you get with human brainstorming, whereas everyone riffs off the first idea. Brainstorming as an activity in corporate America is actually not very effective. I remember studying this in business school. What's much more effective than brainstorming is to first have everyone on their own create a list of 10 ideas before they hear any ideas from anybody else. And then they come together and they share the ideas and then they riff off of that. But if you don't do that first step first of the isolated, separated brainstorming, what you end up getting is the loudest people's opinions rather than the smartest people's opinions. And that quiet, shy thinker often gets blasted by the chatterbox. And so you'll get that same issue with AI. If you just say brainstorm, it'll just give you its most chatterboxy way. But even like the Micaiah mode, those project instructions, if you were to copy that into a Grok project and then say brainstorm, it'll give you the like mainstream brainstorming, and then it will give you the Micaiah mode brainstorming, which will be from a totally different perspective. So even just that is two different angles, and you may find that second angle is way more interesting. So short answer, Grok and Claude. Longer answer, write better prompts.
And in that answer of writing better prompts really requires that you do a lot of that brainstorming before you come to the AI model and ask it to brainstorm for you, right?
You need to have clarity on your goals. So you'll notice a lot of these techniques I talk about, you have to be able to communicate to the AI what you want to accomplish. And a good example of a prompt well written is the book of First Timothy, because you can look at that whole book as an LLM prompt, right? First, who I am. I, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. Here's who I am, and here's what I want. You are Timothy, my beloved son in the faith. And then instruct. So it's identity, which is the same thing you do with AI. Here's who I am. Here's what I want. Here's who you are. You are a fact checker, expert in 18th century romantic exchanges amongst aristocrats or whatever. And then instructions. It's like secure sound doctrine, be a good example on the faith, right? Like he gives all of these instructions at the end. You do the same thing with AI. I want you to check to make sure that all of the courtly manners are appropriate. I want you to make sure that all of the historical details, right? So that kind of model is a good model to follow with AI, and it can help get you much better results, even if
Yeah,
you're still
I
using
found
the AOL of AIs, which is ChatGPT.
I found it's easy to end up on this sort of side rabbit trail with either Claude or Chat, and all of a sudden I'm having this conversation. I mean, you can do it with a human too. You end up someplace completely different and if you backtrack, you're like, wait a minute, I lost track of what I'm actually trying to accomplish here. Yeah. Good. This has been fascinating. Very fascinating. So thank you so much.
I loved that biblical analogy there at the end. That's so good. Well, I want to respect your time, Thomas. Thank you so much for being here. I know that your website here is thomasumstattd.com. Special spelling there.
Although really the better website is authormedia.com. That's where you'll find the patron toolbox and all three of my podcasts. So
which is right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is right there. So I hope that you all hear. I'm just curious though, before we sign off, how many of you feel like you need to branch out of whatever model you're using? Yeah. I think all of us. Yeah, I think
Elon Musk owes me money.
We'll need to talk about this more on the block and share our findings for sure. This has been an education. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.